Thank you so much for joining us today at our official launch. It is so exciting to see so many people who are interested in making a difference for Rhode Island. My name is Josie Alston, and I'm an intern with Ocean State RCV this summer. If you received any nagging emails to get you here, that was probably me. Ocean State RCV is a grassroots, nonpartisan, statewide nonprofit committed to bringing ranked choice to Rhode Island. We're an independent organization run by and for Rhode Island voters. Thus far, we've amassed over 20 volunteers and nearly 200 supporters. We've also recently joined the Let Rhode Island Vote campaign through the Rhode Island Voting Access Coalition, demonstrating our commitment to expanding voting rights and access for Rhode Islanders. I joined Ocean State RCV this summer, having not known much about ranked choice, but feeling passionately about a need for electoral reform in our broken democratic systems. Like many of you, I believe in ranked choice because I'm tired of having my choice implicitly restricted by confining ideas of electability. I believe that our right to vote should also guarantee us the right to vote freely for who we believe in, as opposed to who we're told to support. I'm so grateful to all of you for coming out tonight to support Ocean State RCV as we inaugurate our mission to bring better, more representative elections to this great state. We have a super exciting program planned, which I'll run through quickly now. First, we'll be hearing from an incredible keynote panel of RCV advocates and CD1 candidates, who Leah Caprillo will introduce. Then our Executive Director, Michael Garman, and Fundraising Director, Lilia Gwaltney, will run us through Ocean State RCV strategy and goals. We'll then hear from Nathan Lockwood, the Executive Director of Rank the Vote National, after which we'll disperse into breakout groups corresponding to our different functioning teams, followed by team reports and some brief future planning. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and I'll now hand it over to Leah.
Good evening. Thank you, Josie, for starting us off and reviewing our agenda for this evening. Good evening. My name is Leah Craiglow, and I live in Warwick with my husband. Our daughter lives in Warwick. Our amazing grandson and his cool parents live in Providence. So we are all in Rhode Island and excited to be a part of this movement to make our elections better represent us all. And I also am excited to host house parties where people can have discussions and learn and talk about their own experiences and what ranked choice voting could be. So our first focus this evening is our keynote panel, who will be sharing their thoughts on ranked choice voting. And although there will be an opportunity later for those who want to learn more about ranked choice voting and how it functions in one of our small groups, I'd just like to give you a 10,000-foot overview so we're all on the same page as we get started, okay? So let's say that we all want to have some ice cream, but one person's going to the store and they can only bring one flavor back, right? So how are we going to decide? And please, I don't want to eat licorice ice cream. So we're all going to do ranked choice voting. I'm going to put my top 5 favorites. I'm going to rank them in my order of preference. Then you do some wonderful ranked choice voting math that lets everybody's ranked choice filter in until you come up with a flavor that the majority of people say, I'd like a scoop of that. And they come back, and my third choice happens to be what we get to eat. I take my scoop, and I know that I had a part in the decision making. And that's what voting is, right? Voting is having a voice, having a part in our collective decision making. So that's what we're talking about tonight, is ranked choice voting if you're new to the discussion. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started with our panel tonight. We're thankful for the presence of these Rhode Islanders who are stepping up and offering to represent us in Washington for Congressional District 1. I think they each deserve a round of applause just for being willing to put themselves out there in our charged political climate. So just to be clear, ranked choice voting, Ocean State RCV, is a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse parties or individual candidates. And we believe that RCV is foundationally a tool for democracy, and it's not tied to any political agenda. However, we do support opportunities to learn about our candidates and what is important to them, especially when one of those values is ranked choice voting. So we emailed all the candidates who declared their candidacy, Democrats and Republicans, and then we invited everyone who qualified for the ballot to come tonight and briefly share how they see our CV as a benefit for our democracy and how it fits within their platform. So that's what they're going to share with me. Let me take just a moment and introduce each of the candidates, and if you would just raise your hand as I introduce you. First, we have Providence City Councilman John Goncalves.
Hi, everyone.
A resident of Providence as a Fox Point and Eastside community member for over 25 years. He's a passionate educator and community advocate who has worked to advance issues on education, environmental justice, and neighborhood quality of life. Currently chairing several city council committees, John hopes to continue his advocacy for the Ocean State's working families in Washington. State Senator Ana Quezada. Coming to Rhode Island with her family at the age of 16 from Colombia, seeking political asylum, Sandra has been...
No, that's Sandra Cano.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I moved ahead. My finger was scrolling too fast. Sorry. Senator Ana Quezada was elected in 2016 and represents the south side and west end of Providence. She has sponsored legislation for causes such as raising the minimum wage and preventing human trafficking. Ana says she has spent the last 6 years making sure the people's voices are heard at the State House. Next, State Senator Sandra Cano. Sandra is the one who joined us coming from Colombia at the age of 16. Sandra has been serving Patuxent in the state of Rhode Island in the political arena for the last 10 years. She began on the Patuxent School Committee and now serves in the State Senate, where she has chaired the Senate Education Committee. Sandra is dedicated to fighting for economic, racial, and social justice and equity. Technical professional, Stephanie Beauté. Settling in Rhode Island when she was in the 7th grade, Stephanie earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Rhode Island and her master's from the University of Maryland. As a senior IT professional, Stephanie has led diverse teams for global enterprises such as GE and believes in partnering with others, tackling complex problems head-on, and crafting solutions that work for everyone. And former Biden advisor Gabriel Amo, who is going to be here via a video. He will be here via video this evening. He's a native of Pawtucket and the son of 2 parents from West Africa. Gabe worked in the Rhode Island State House for former Governor Gina Raimondo and in the White House for 2 presidents, President Obama and President Biden. Most recently by serving the Biden administration, helping state and local leaders access resources which became available to them through legislation. Gabe has a strong sense of optimism that if we come together, each of us can have a tomorrow that's better than today. So those are our candidates. I invite you to come up in the same order that I introduced you.
Thank you so much. Just gonna see what this message here is. Apologies. Gotta make sure everything. Right.
So, Councilman John Goncalves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Floor is yours, Councilman. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. Well, thank you all for being here, and if we can give a round of applause once again to the folks who are hosting this tonight, I greatly appreciate that. It's such a great initiative, and I'm so glad that we're kicking it off right here in Rhode Island, and it's almost long overdue. So, I grew up in Providence, but I had an opportunity after Brown to go to Minnesota, where I served as an educator, but also was involved in electoral politics. And they do ranked choice voting there, particularly in the city where I live, Minneapolis. And it works magically. So if there's any doubters on ranked choice voting, it works. It really works. So yes, let's give it up for ranked choice voting. The problem is it's not spreading as far and wide as it should. So right now there are 51 American jurisdictions that have ranked choice voting, which allows over 13 million people all across this country to participate in that kind of process. And I love the analogy that you gave around ice cream. In fact, when they were rolling ranked choice voting out in Alaska, one of the things that they did was they said, well, everyone in Alaska likes fish. So if you had to go into a grocery store and buy several different kinds of fish, what kind of fish would you buy? And that really resonated with Alaskan voters. And now it's a state law in Alaska, but also in places like Maine. But those are the 2 states that are doing it. We need to, again, expand that far and wide. And the reason why I think it works particularly well is because as a candidate of color, as you can imagine, and I'm sure there are other candidates of color on the congressional stage that will feel the same way, it's really an equity issue. You know, I grew up in a single parent household. I grew up in poverty. You know, I'm a teacher, so I can't call a bunch of, you know, big donors to try to fund our campaign. And the barrier to entry, particularly for candidates of color, particularly for first-time candidates, is incredibly, incredibly hard. And so if we really want to balance the level playing field or equalize the level playing field, then we need to give people an opportunity to actually have their voice be heard and participate in our democracy. And I think that's why ranked choice voting is so critically important. But I'd also like to say that it works, and we've seen it work in other places internationally. So Ireland has been doing ranked choice voting for a really long time. So is Australia. And it's proven to be beneficial to the voters there. And one of the things, or a couple of things that I made sure to kind of note here is that each vote really counts to the fullest extent possible. And the current system that only allows you to have one vote go towards one person is really, it's archaic. It's a system that has been a part of our electoral process for a really long time, but it's important to have change in our democracy, and it will allow for more voices to be reflected in the process. But the other piece is that it lessens the incentive to run negative campaigns. Look, we're running this congressional district race right now. What we're seeing, especially as things start dwindling down, is a lot of mudslinging. And that's really unfortunate. If you had an opportunity to choose many different candidates, you would see less mudslinging and people trying to take out the front runner or the person who is perceived to be the front runner. And I think that's an important aspect of our politics. Me personally, I'd like to run a very clean, positive campaign, but we're not seeing that right now, especially in this congressional district campaign, but we see it all across the country as well. The other piece is that you know, the instant runoff of voting is an aspect of ranked choice voting where it's faster and it's cheaper than runoff. So you don't have to have another runoff election, which results in big money pouring into these electoral campaigns, and people can just vote once and they can rank their votes and they don't have to pour more and more money into these campaigns. I think that's, again, one of the biggest challenges that we're experiencing. And we're also experiencing this particularly in this race where, again, the people who raise the most money somehow have an ability to get their message out far and wide, but it also incentivizes places like Washington, D.C. to just pour more money into these races. We need to repeal and end Citizens United once and for all so that everyone has an equal shot. And then lastly, it lowers the barrier for people like myself, women, people of color, and I think that's just so important. So that's the reason why I'm supportive of ranked choice voting. I would love to see our legislature act on this, and I know that in my capacity as a chair of state legislative affairs on the Providence City Council, I'm going to certainly continue to urge my colleagues in the future to have these kinds of processes where everyone has a shot, and your power and privilege doesn't necessarily dictate whether or not you are able to have a seat at the table. So thank you all for being here, and really, really appreciate you all engaging in this process. I can't stay long, but I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, and please give the host another round of applause for engaging in this event and putting this on tonight.
Thank you so much, Councilman. Senator Quezada. Thank you so much. Apologies for running a bit behind schedule, but the floor is yours.
Well, good evening, and thank you for being here. I think it's a great opportunity to be talking about election and the opportunity to fix the problem that we already have. listen to the conversation and what this councilman just said. I think one of the issues, especially in the community of color, it would be, we have to do a very educating into this issue for people to be able to know how to do it. Because I notice, and especially elderly who have an issue doing this kind of, to voting this way, for many reasons. And I said that because I'm somebody who go to many of these elderly high-rise, and I represent many of them in my district. And even for them to be able to vote for one person, sometimes it's hard. Then I think we had to really be educating our public to be able to do it. I really think it's a great idea, and I think especially in this race, would be wonderful that people have the opportunity to vote for more than one person. Because I'm sure, listen to all of us, you will say, well, I like this one first, and this one second, and this one third. And I think we will have a very chance to win. And I cannot agree more with Councilman, with the councilman when he said about people of color to run for office, especially when you're talking about money-wise. And I said that because I'm one of the underdog in this campaign. I represent one of the poorer communities in Providence. And it's going to be very hard for, especially if you follow the campaign, and you know I'm not the one who raised most of the money. Because my community don't have the money. Most of the money that I got is $20, $50, $100. And let me tell you, it's been very hard for them to do those donations. Because when you work and live in a community that I represent, low-income family who make the minimum wage, it's hard for them to get out of the check to give to any politician. Then I represent that community and I know how hard it is. Then it would give people the opportunity for more people of color to run for office in the future. But at the same time, I go back to the education piece because I notice how hard it is now that we're doing the early voters, and there's so many times you have to go with them to help them to be able to vote. Then when you have to give them many choices to be able to choose, it will be harder for them to make that decision. Then I think the early education that we started on this plan, I think it would be very good. I think it would be excellent to start there, educating people how this process going to benefit them, how this process will benefit people of color, how this process benefit elderly, and how this process allow them to be able to make better choices when they vote. Then I think that's one of the things that I'm not going to talk because, Alaska, they say they did it since 2018, and it's been working fine. Then if it's worked fine in Alaska, I know New York City do it, then I think it's something that we can implement it. We just have to know how and when. I passed a legislation this last year about people who sign with the X. And that's a legislation that, especially in my community, we have many people who don't know how to write and read. People who come from another country. And you may be thinking it's more often than what you think. Then for people who don't know how to write and read, it's even harder to make different choices. And they sign with an X because they don't know how to sign their name. Then we passed a legislation that now they don't have to sign with an X. They can ask somebody else to sign for them. And at the beginning, when that legislation was, they brought it in front of me from the election, I thought a little bit it was easier or it was harder for them. Because if you don't have somebody who can do this signature for you, that person not going to be able to vote. Then I think, it's many things, especially for young people, this would be an excellent thing for them to do. But we have to think about people who don't know how to read and write. We have to think about elderly and going back, people of color. And those are my thought about this, is I think it's a great idea and I hope we can do it. We just have to work a little bit harder to let people know about and to work and educate people as soon as we can. See, this is a legislation that we planning to pass for the next few years. I really want to thank each one of you for being here. And I wanted to say thank you to the people for putting this together for you. Thank you so much. And myself, I didn't have that much information about these ways of vote until today. when I was, last week, when I got the invitation, I started finding information, how the process would work, and how would make it easier for people of color to be able to participate in election. Again, thank you so much for inviting me to this event.
Thank you so much, Senator. Senator Cano, please come on up. Sorry about the delay. We were a bit behind schedule getting going. Thank you so much for being here and for your patience.
I'm happy to be here. Buenas tardes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sandra Cano, State Senator from Pawtucket, and I want to commend the group here for launching the ranked choice voting. I would say, Michael, thank you so much for the invitation, along with the volunteers, Joyce, Leah, everyone here has been so kind. I would say that as a proud mom and as an immigrant and as a person of color running in this campaign, what a better time to launch this event than in a 12-candidate election for a pride. So this is a very good job to all of you. 12 candidates. Let's talk about the amazing diversity that we have in this election. I would say that I think that my colleagues already mentioned a lot of positive things about ranked choice voting. But what I would say I'm very excited about is to make sure that when we do have ranked choice voting, that we really encourage campaigning to be more positive, right? I have always done that ever since I got elected to the school committee and then to the city council and then to the state senate. And I would say that every time I choose to debate the issues, but not the person. I think it's not a good thing, especially when we go into the same party, Democratic or Republican. I know that you are nonpartisan here, but I do believe that it's important because as a party, we should always have the unity first. So ranked choice voting actually allowed that to be happening, because let's think about it. If I are not the first choice, I want to be the second choice. I want to make sure, and people in this country are tired of division. And people in this country are trying of like our democratic values and also our democratic choices to be so divisive. Like now people don't talk to each other to get policy work for others. So this is a very good way to encourage that behavior. Not only that, but I think that I am very, very excited that you are having this group of volunteers doing civic engagement in Rhode Island, because that's really what ultimately does. It engage people in the civic process. I do believe that if we want our democracy to work, people need to understand how to see their choices and how to see the candidates in front of them. And I think Sandra Cano said, if you don't like, you may like something about one candidate and then another about another, you could always rank that choice. I'm also going to say something different. Last legislative session, I was very proud to see Senator Val Lawson actually put a legislation, and Senator Val Lawson is one of my supporters and a friend. And that legislation, what it aims to do is to make sure that we do primary presidential elections ranked choice in Rhode Island. Not only we were able to introduce the legislation in the Senate, he was able to co-sponsor it, but guess what? She did an amazing job at the State House with a lot of the General Assembly members, and what she did ranked vote choice in the hallways in one day, and people could do the ranked choice voting for chocolate. We were talking about ice cream, she did it for chocolate. So I was able, not only she had pieces of chocolate in front of people and they taste, and then you could get to choose what's your first choice and second choice, and that was the best way to making sure that we have some good results. And it was good because she also not only announced in the floor of the Senate like how it worked, but people get to go to the process at the State House. So we can do it. There is a legislation already at the state level that is happening to be introduced. Make sure we organize. Make sure that we bring the issue of equity at front of this, the issue of unity. I think that the strategy here is to make sure that we educate the community about the opportunities that we have with ranked choice voting. We make sure that we level the playing field, like my other colleagues have, opponents have said. And lastly, I want to say, I would love to stay here longer. But I think I told Michael that I do have a commitment at 7, and it's a forum going up at 7 p.m. And I wanted to make sure I was present just to tell you that you do an amazing job, to tell you the positive things about ranked choice voting, and also to tell you that I'm very excited to already doing positive campaign as a candidate for Congress, because I really think that we need to do the best job to represent people of Rhode Island in a manner that they see about the issues, and I love to help people through policy, and that's why I'm running for Congress, because I really want to help. So that being said, I want to thank you for the opportunity today. I want to say good job. I'm happy to be part of the launch, and let's get this going.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you. Miss Beauté, it's all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I know that we are pressed for time. And so I'm really excited to hear a lot of folks support ranked choice voting, but even more so, especially with all the candidates that are running and their colleagues that are endorsing them. So they'll get this passed, right? Because we're talking about democratic unity. So I'm sure that they will ensure, I know that they're running out the door, but they're going to ensure that this in fact passes through. So I think that that's important. One of the main things that I love is data. I'm a big fan and a big proponent of data and the accuracy of data and having that reflective. And when you omit certain pieces of information, it's not really reflective of the entire general public. I know that we gave the example of fish. I know we gave the example of chocolate. But what if you have folks that don't like fish or chocolate, and those are their only choices, right? I'm not saying that that's the best combination of sorts, but and so making sure that that is fully reflective of what your options are really captures your vote. And that is the whole essence of democracy. It's being able to capture your vote in an accurate way that reflects the population at hand. And so if you, for example, with political polls, I find them very interesting because it's only a segment of a group based on whoever shares that poll. Then you don't really get reflective of what the entire scope of the problem is. And so how can you actually make an informative decision with biased information or with skewed data? And so ranked choice voting really curbs that, right? So it really allows you to see the full pendulum of what your options are, and then being able to make an informed decision based on what your preferences are, right? And then having the entire population reflect that. So whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, your vote in fact counts. I think we have a unique situation here because I'm a fan of data, that if we actually had ranked choice voting in this election, we would see a different outcome. And unfortunately, because of the way that it is, a lot of folks might land in the 5% or 2%, or even based on low turnout, people would get low numbers. And so what does that do? That incentivizes someone like me to run again, right? Because it's like, you didn't even win by that much, so how do I know that folks really wanted you to win? And then you're gonna be like, ticked off, that why did she show back? Well, you didn't really win by that much. And so I really wanna hear from what the voters have to say. And so I think that being able to leverage accurate data is very, very important. It's beyond politics, it's really reflective of the voices of the individuals, and I think that that's the most critical piece. And so thank you for your time, and thank you for organizing this. Since this is recorded, I'll say it again, I hope the legislators in the Senate and the House will pass this, since it's there.
Thank you so much, Ms. Beauté. Thank you. We really appreciate your time. We appreciate having you here today. Our final candidate we're going to hear from is Mr. Gabriel Amo, who was unable to join us in person, but he submitted a brief video in support of ranked choice voting, which we will play now.
My name is Gabriel Amo, candidate for Congress in the 1st Congressional District. First, let me say congratulations to Ocean State Ranked Choice Voting for your statewide launch. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you virtually. As you know, and as people across the country know, democracy in our nation is at risk. Certainly the presidency of Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans in Congress and in state legislatures across the country threaten to undermine our elections for years to come. That's why I'm proud to support efforts to improve our electoral system, to reinstill faith in our democracy and ensure confidence in the selection of our leaders, because it is so important. And so ranked choice voting has shown to be successful in other places like Maine, and I'm supportive of trying it out right here in Rhode Island as a pilot effort, seeing how it works, and then if we need to tinker with the things that do not. With any big change to a process like voting, there needs to be a robust discussion with stakeholders, people like election administrators, local boards of canvassers, and of course, most importantly, actual voters. So I look forward to this process moving forward. I'm happy to see young people in particular leading these efforts, and I'm happy to be supportive in any way I can. So again, thank you for providing me an opportunity to speak with you, especially being able to do it remotely. And I hope that everybody has a wonderful night. Onward for the work ahead. Take care.
Oh yeah, I can move that on to the next slide for you. Oh.
So just a couple of pieces to finish up that section. Thank you so much to all the candidates. It really was great to get to hear them and see them all. I found it very educational. No matter whom you support, just a note that the Republican primary is being contested as well. So we hope you'll vote in the upcoming primary if you live in Congressional District 1. Early voting runs through Monday the 4th of September, and Election Day is Tuesday the 5th. The mail ballot application deadline has passed, but for anyone who has one, it needs to be in the hands of the Board of Elections by the time polls close on Election Day. So make sure you get your vote in. So next, Michael Garman and Lilia Gwaltney will be sharing with us about the strategy and goals of Ocean State Ranked Choice Voting.
Thank you so much, Leah. Thank you. We're really glad to have heard from all our candidates. So we're at early stages, like Senators Quezada and Cano talked about in their remarks. It's incredibly important that we get out, spread the word to as many people as possible. We're educating voters and really being intentional about whom we reach out to, trying to get in touch with as many groups, as many communities, and trying to build a coalition that's as diverse as possible in terms of ideology, in terms of background, in terms of experience, all these different ways we want to make sure that our movement is working for everyone and includes everyone in it, because we truly believe this is a change that can work for everyone. We want everyone to be part of it. So our early goals are to reach 5,000 supporters, 500 potential volunteers on our list. Again, this is not an easy job, this is not a quick job, this is something we believe we can do, and the more people we have here, the more people who are talking to voters, presenting to community groups, the better we're going to be at bringing that about. Again, we want to mention that we're part of the Let Rhode Island Vote Coalition, as part of Let Rhode Island Vote campaign, as part of the Common Cause of Rhode Island Voting Access Coalition, and we're happy to support their advocacy efforts. They're currently working on a measure that would implement same-day voter registration in Rhode Island. We think that's a common sense, practical, and very important cause. We're so excited to be working with them, working with other coalition partners like the Democratic Women's Caucus as part of the Let Rhode Island Vote Coalition, the Women Project, the Providence branch of the NAACP, all these different groups that are really aligned behind the support of voter advocacy and voter access and voter choice. Next stage, as Senator Cano alluded to in her remarks, there is a legislative effort underway right now. It was sponsored by 10 members of each house of the General Assembly in this past session. Representative Kislik and Senator Lawson, both of whom are from East Providence, are the lead sponsors of that. So in this phase, we'll still be working, of course, on building our coalition, reaching as many folks as possible, but we'll be especially interested in targeting the districts of key legislators, like committee chairs who control the flow of these bills to the floor of the legislature, floor of the General Assembly, making sure those folks are out there talking to their legislators, pressuring them to support ranked choice voting. But again, we need a strong base. We need as many folks as possible who support our movement so we can point to this and say, look at us, we have a strong group, we have a passionate group, this is something voters care about and understand. That's why that voter education piece remains crucial throughout. And we think presidential primaries are an excellent place to start for several reasons. One is that there's already a legislative effort there, so there's already support. Another is that in Rhode Island, the presidential primary, as you all know, is on its own ballot. It's the only race on the ballot when you go in to vote that day, so it's a bit less intimidating than walking in there and seeing 15 different ranked choice grids when you've never used that before. So starting off small, starting off familiar, getting people familiar with it. And so there's that, there's the legislative support, and there's the fact that presidential primaries are both some of the most important elections. A few races that are more important than picking your party's nominee for the highest office in the country. And there are ones where votes are frequently wasted, particularly in many ways, primaries split many ways. We saw this in 2020, particularly with the rise of mail voting. We had an estimated 2 to 3 million people had their votes wasted when they voted by mail, and then the candidate they supported dropped out between when they voted by mail and when their state's presidential primary day was. With ranked choice voting, their votes could have just counted for the next candidate on their ballot instead of being wasted. Talk about 2 to 3 million people, that's 8 to 12% of the Democratic primary electorate. That's a robust figure. Phase 3, very similar to Phase 2. Everywhere ranked choice voting has been implemented in states like Maine and Alaska, cities like New York, in Berkeley, California, about 20 different small towns in Utah. Voters are excited, voters want more ranked choice voting, and we're going to capitalize on that enthusiasm. Again, repeat the legislative strategy from the last one, but expanding ranked choice voting past presidential primaries into other primaries. And in some ways, this is especially more important in Rhode Island, where the Democratic primary, regardless of how you feel about that, is often the de facto general election. It's especially important to make sure that that person who is the strong favorite to win the election is someone who's supported by the majority of the voters in their district, in their constituency. And the final phase, again, this is well down the line, but ranked choice voting for general elections will likely require a constitutional amendment to require 2/3 of each house of the General Assembly and a simple majority of voters at the ballot box in the next election. So again, this is really a key stage where it's important that we, as many people as possible, know what it is, know how it works, know why it matters. By this point, voters will have been familiar with it from using it in primary elections. Voters will be excited about it, will have an idea of how it works. This will not be easy. It's hard to get 2/3 of anyone to agree on anything, let alone the General Assembly to agree on passing this. But this is our long-term, deep, far in the future. This is where we would like to see ourselves end up someday. With that in mind, I'd like to welcome up Nathan Lockwood. Nathan is the Executive Director of Rank the Vote USA, the national nonpartisan group that works to support ranked choice voting movements like us. Before joining ranked choice voting on the national scale, Nathan was one of the key leaders in the statewide movement in Massachusetts, Voter Choice Massachusetts, that built one of the strongest statewide movements in support of ranked choice voting and got millions of citizens to support radical change to our electoral systems. Nathan has you on hand to offer some words of wisdom, and we're so glad he could join us tonight. So please welcome Nathan.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Michael. I don't know about words of wisdom. I'll offer some words of excitement, because I'm really excited to see everybody here tonight. First of all, good to be back in Rhode Island. My family lived in Tiverton when I was born, so I spent the first couple of years of my life down here, which was a lot of fun. The little of it I remember. Anyways, Massachusetts. So Rhode Island. I hope you folks realize, how important what you're doing is, and as a few of the speakers, including Senator Quezada and others have talked about, there's a learning curve if you want to change voting, right? Like, we've been voting the same way for about 200 years, and when you learn about ranked choice voting, I think most folks see that it offers a lot of real big advantages that folks have talked about tonight. But the thing we're up against is, so in fact, what we know is that from polls, where America's at right now, when you explain ranked choice voting to folks, about 60% of them say, yeah, I like that. But most people still haven't heard of it. So that's why the work of Ocean State RCV is so important. And it's an opportunity, a lot of great things happen in Rhode Island, and it's an opportunity like this where a small state can make a big difference. Another relatively small state population-wise, back in 2016, folks there wanted to improve their elections, and I'm talking about Maine, and so they decided to become the first state to pass ranked choice voting for all their state and federal elections. And that's really what inspired the folks in Massachusetts that got me involved in it. And so now Rank the Vote works with over half the state, groups like this one in over half the states in the US. And some of those groups started a few years ago, and they're in states right now, like there's a group we work with in Illinois, Fair Vote Illinois, that formed about 4 years ago. And 2 weeks ago, Governor Pritzker signed legislation to study implementing ranked choice voting for presidential elections, which was a big deal. And last year, that same group got ranked choice voting passed in the city of Evanston, just outside of Chicago. And they got it passed with 82% of the vote there. So that got folks in Chicago excited, and now all Illinois is talking about what a great thing this could be for them, especially after a mayor's race, which was very similar to your congressional primary here with a lot of candidates running. And even the winner of that race was like, yeah, this would be a good thing. Let's work towards that. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. This is a great launch. Like there's the states that started going down this road a few years ago. And then it's exciting to see the progress they've made. I remember in Massachusetts when I got started, and Michael and Lilia have shown you some of the goals and targets. And I remember the director of Voter Choice Massachusetts with the thing up there, we probably had signed up maybe 5,000 people. And they're like saying, well, I think that to get the support for a ballot measure in Massachusetts, we're gonna have to sign up 50,000 people. And I just started, I'd been at a farmer's market or a festival the weekend before, and I signed up like 40 people, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's a lot of people. But but you know what? It takes time, but the time goes by quick, and you get there. It's crazy. Massachusetts raised $10 million for a ballot measure. At the time when I first joined, we were talking about raising $10,000. So these things seem really hard at first, but if you stick with it, it's a great reform. People will get as excited about it as you do. So I wish you luck on that journey, and I think you're off to a great start. And just your cohort here, Maryland had a grassroots launch last month, and Wednesday I was in Boston, where there's a group in Boston. So you're not alone, but everything you do is going to have huge impact. So thanks so much for being part of this.